What if growing older and growing up were not the same thing? Imagine a 34-year-old man named Daniel. He has a job, pays bills, has friends, and is in a relationship. But when his manager gives him criticism, he immediately becomes defensive. When he makes a mistake, someone else is always blamed. When his partner raises a difficult issue, he shuts down, changes the subject, or turns the conversation into an argument. And when life becomes overwhelming, he expects the people around him to rescue him. So, what is happening, and why can an adult with an adult life still struggle with such basic emotional challenges in relationships? Is Daniel simply acting childish, or could these behaviors reflect deeper patterns involving emotional development, coping, attachment, and learned behavior? Emotional immaturity is not automatically a mental disorder, and it is not a formal diagnosis by itself. These patterns may include regulating intense emotions, tolerating frustration, accepting responsibility, understanding another person's perspective, communicating honestly, and maintaining emotional stability without constantly depending on someone else. Daniel may be perfectly capable of handling adult responsibilities until something emotionally uncomfortable happens. At work, his manager says, "This report needs improvement." Instead of hearing feedback as information, Daniel experiences it as a personal attack. Shame rises quickly. His body becomes tense. His mind searches for a defense. Maybe the instructions were unclear. Maybe another employee caused the problem. Maybe the manager dislikes him. The mistake itself becomes less important than escaping the uncomfortable feeling associated with it. Later, Daniel has an argument with his partner. She explains that she feels ignored when he repeatedly cancels plans. Rather than listening, he says she is too sensitive. He brings up something she did months ago. He may become silent, sarcastic, angry, or suddenly leave the room. The goal, consciously or unconsciously, is often not to solve the problem, but to stop feeling exposed. This is one of the central features of emotional immaturity. Discomfort can feel like a threat. Anger, disappointment, fear, guilt, and shame are normal human emotions. Emotional maturity does not mean never experiencing them. It means developing enough internal capacity to feel them without immediately being controlled by them. An emotionally immature adult may instead shut down, explode, make excuses, become passive aggressive, demand reassurance, or shift blame. This creates an important difference between chronological age and emotional development. A person can be 40 years old and still respond to conflict with emotional strategies learned much earlier in life. Sometimes these patterns have understandable roots. A child raised in an unpredictable home may learn to avoid conflict at all costs. Someone who was overprotected may have had few opportunities to experience frustration, make mistakes, or solve problems independently. Emotional neglect can teach a child that feelings are inconvenient or unsafe to express. Children also learn by watching. If adults constantly blame others, avoid difficult conversations, or refuse to apologize, those behaviors can become familiar models of adulthood. Trauma and difficult childhood experiences may also affect how a person responds to stress and relationships. But understanding the origin of a pattern is not the same as excusing its consequences. A painful past can help explain why someone struggles. It does not automatically make harmful behavior acceptable, and adulthood eventually brings responsibility for learning healthier ways to respond. Living with emotional immaturity can become exhausting. The person may want closeness but resist accountability. They may demand understanding while struggling to offer it. They may apologize only after consequences become serious, then repeat the same behavior without meaningful change. Over time, partners, Friends or family members can feel less like equals and more like managers, rescuers, or emotional caretakers. Yet emotional immaturity does not always look obvious. It may hide behind charm, humor, confidence, independence, or professional success. Someone can be highly competent at work and deeply avoidant in intimate relationships. They can appear strong while being unable to tolerate criticism, uncertainty, or emotional discomfort. The deeper question is not whether someone can perform adult responsibilities, it is whether they can remain emotionally present when reality becomes uncomfortable. And if these patterns were learned through experience, relationships, and repeated coping strategies, then another question naturally follows: can they also be unlearned? Before we answer that, we need to understand how emotional immaturity shapes everyday behavior and why the people around it often become part of the pattern without realizing it. Why do some emotional patterns continue for years, even when a person is intelligent, successful, and capable in almost every other area of life? Imagine Marcus. At work, he is reliable and talented, but his relationships follow the same painful pattern. A disagreement becomes an argument. The argument becomes blame. Eventually, the relationship suffers. Yet Marcus concludes that everyone around him is difficult. Then the cycle begins again. This is why emotional immaturity can continue for so long. Intelligence does not automatically create emotional awareness. Success does not automatically teach accountability. A person can become highly skilled at achieving goals while remaining inexperienced at handling shame, disappointment, vulnerability, or conflict. Emotional growth requires practice. It requires noticing what happens inside you before reacting, tolerating uncomfortable feelings, accepting feedback, taking responsibility, and repeatedly choosing healthier responses. But avoidance often feels easier. Refusing to apologize may protect someone from shame for a few minutes. Blaming a partner may protect their self image. Walking away from a difficult conversation may create immediate relief. The problem is that short term relief can strengthen long term avoidance. The cycle is simple. Emotional discomfort appears. The person feels threatened and reacts defensively. Responsibility is avoided. The problem remains unresolved. Eventually, another situation creates the same discomfort, and the same response happens again. Over time, the person may honestly believe that everyone else is the problem because they keep experiencing conflict without examining the pattern they bring into each situation. But emotional immaturity does not always mean someone is lazy, selfish, or incapable of love. Some emotionally immature adults genuinely care about others. Their problem may be that they never developed the tools needed to communicate, regulate intense feelings, repair conflict, or tolerate vulnerability. Compassion is important, but compassion cannot replace accountability. Knowing why a pattern exists does not mean accepting it forever. A difficult childhood may explain emotional avoidance. Anxiety may explain defensiveness. Fear of rejection may explain withdrawal. But explanations should become starting points for growth, not permanent excuses. So, how does growth begin? Often it starts with learning to name the emotion before acting on it. Instead of saying, "You are making me angry," a person may ask, "Am I feeling embarrassed, rejected, afraid, or powerless?" Naming an emotion creates space between feeling and behavior. The next step may be learning to pause. Not every criticism requires a defense. Not every disagreement must be won. A mature response might sound like, "I need a moment to process this," rather than an insult, threat, or sudden disappearance. Growth also involves accepting feedback without immediately building a case against the person giving it. Taking responsibility does not mean accepting every accusation as true. It means honestly examining your own behavior. Empathy is another essential skill. Emotional maturity allows two realities to exist at once. I did not intend to hurt you, and I understand that my behavior still affected you. For some people, therapy can provide valuable support, especially when deeper trauma, anxiety, depression, attachment difficulties, or long standing patterns are involved. It can provide a structured place to understand patterns and practice new responses. Most importantly, real change is usually visible through consistent behavior, not dramatic promises. It looks ordinary, saying, I was wrong, listening without interrupting, tolerating disappointment without punishing everyone nearby, apologizing without excuses, returning to a difficult conversation instead of escaping it, and changing the behavior that made the apology necessary. So, can an adult who never learned emotional maturity develop it later? Yes, but hope should remain realistic. Emotional growth is possible, yet it requires honesty, responsibility, and repeated practice. New emotional habits are built through repetition. Growing up is not only about age, money, jobs, or responsibilities. Emotional maturity does not mean perfection. The difference is what happens next. Can you notice your reaction? Can you understand its impact? Can you take responsibility without attacking someone else? Can you choose a healthier response the next time? That is where emotional growth begins. Because growing older happens automatically. Growing emotionally does not. That process can feel uncomfortable, but discomfort is often the place where awareness, responsibility, and genuine change begin to develop. It is a process of learning, practicing, repairing, and choosing differently again and again.